survived something. Maybe it had a name: abuse, neglect, a childhood that taught you to read a room before you could read a book. Maybe it didn't. Just years of living in a place where relaxing was dangerous, where you had to stay alert, small, ready. And now, objectively, you're safe. The house is quiet. The threat is gone. The people who hurt you are far away or dead, or simply no longer in charge of your life. So why can't you rest? Why does every good moment feel like the calm before something? Why do you scan the face of someone who loves you, looking for the moment they turn? Why, when nothing is wrong, does your chest still feel like something is wrong? You've probably told yourself a story about this. You're anxious by nature. You haven't worked through the past enough. You need more therapy, more insight, more time. You just need to understand it better, and then one day it will finally let go. It won't. Not like that. Because what happened to you isn't a memory you failed to digest. It's not a chapter you haven't finished reading. Bessel van der Kolk, the psychiatrist who spent 4 decades studying what trauma actually does to a human being, discovered something most people still don't understand about themselves. The part of you that is still living in the old emergency isn't your mind, it's your body. And your body does not process time the way your mind does. Your mind knows the war is over. Your nervous system doesn't. This is not a metaphor. Van der Kolk's research showed that trauma physically reorganizes the nervous system, recalibrates the alarm, rewires how you perceive threat, changes how you metabolize safety itself. The system that saved you in the old world kept running in the new one, because that's what systems do. What worked, it repeats. It doesn't check to see if you still need it. So you are not broken. You are not weak. You are not ungrateful for the life you built. You are a person whose body learned one language fluently, survival, and has never been taught another. And no amount of understanding is going to teach it, because understanding lives in the part of the brain that already knows you're safe. The part that doesn't know is somewhere deeper, older, wordless. It doesn't respond to arguments. It responds to experience. That gap between what you know and what your body still feels. That is the exact place you've been stuck. Not because you failed to heal, because you've been trying to heal the wrong layer. And once you see that, everything you thought was a character flaw starts looking like something else entirely. You've already figured it out. You know where it started. You can name the people, the years, the patterns. You've read the books, had the conversations, sat across from therapists, and explained your own life back to yourself in clean paragraphs. And none of it made you able to rest. This is the part nobody warned you about. You can understand your trauma perfectly and still flinch when someone raises their voice. You can map every dynamic of your childhood and still freeze when a partner walks into the room with the wrong expression on their face. You can be brilliant about your past and still, physically, live inside of it. Van der Kolk spent years watching this happen. Patients who had done the work, who could articulate everything, and whose bodies had not received the memo. He realized something that reorganized his entire field. Trauma is not primarily a story. It is not a memory locked in the archive of the mind, waiting to be retrieved and examined. Trauma is a physiological imprint, a recalibration of the nervous system itself. When something overwhelming happens, the brain's alarm system, the amygdala, the brainstem, the autonomic circuits, learns. It learns what danger looks like, smells like, sounds like. It learns how to fire faster next time. And after enough firing, it stops asking whether the threat is still there. It just fires. This is why you can know intellectually that you are safe and still have a body that disagrees. The part of your brain that knows you're safe isn't the part running the show. It's being overruled, moment by moment, by a lower system that doesn't speak in words and doesn't care about your insight. Van der Kolk put it plainly. Long after the traumatic experience is over, The survival brain can be reactivated by the faintest hint of danger, and it mobilizes the entire organism as if the original event were happening again. Right now, in your living room, at your job, next to someone who loves you. This is not a failure of processing. It is a feature of how the system was built. What saved you is still running, which means the strategy most people try, thinking their way out, analyzing harder, understanding deeper, is using the wrong tool on the wrong layer. It's like trying to rewrite machine code by giving a speech about it. The code doesn't hear you. It doesn't know what a speech is. The nervous system speaks one language. It is not English. It is not Portuguese. It is not argument. It is experience. Slow, repeated, somatic experience of something new happening to the body while the body is paying attention. That's the shift. That's why nothing has been working. You've been addressing the part of yourself that already knows. The part that doesn't know has been waiting, patiently, for you to stop explaining and start teaching it something it can actually feel. And before we can do that, you need to see exactly how it's been running your life without your permission. Because survival mode isn't one thing. It has 3 doors. And you've been walking through all of them without knowing their names. If this content is making sense to you, click the subscribe button and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for your support. You think you just can't relax. That's the surface. Underneath, there are 3 specific mechanisms running you. And until you can name them, you cannot begin to dismantle them. The first is hypervigilance. Your nervous system never stopped scanning. Walking into a room, you read faces before you read words. You track tone shifts, micro-expressions, the temperature of a silence. You call this being perceptive. It isn't. It is a surveillance system that was installed when reading the room was survival, and that has never been decommissioned. The problem isn't that you notice too much. The problem is that relaxation itself now registers as danger. Because to the old system, letting your guard down is how people got hurt. This is why pleasant moments make you uneasy, why you sabotage the calm, why the good thing feels unstable even when nothing is wrong. Your nervous system has learned that unguarded is unsafe, and it will break the calm to restore what it considers the correct baseline. Alert. The second gate is a dysregulated body. You live in one of 2 states, and sometimes both in the same day. The first state is chronic activation, shallow breathing you never notice, shoulders that never fully drop, a jaw that stays clenched through sleep, digestion that doesn't work, a pulse that runs a little too fast for a life that is, objectively, at rest. Your body is idling at a speed designed for emergencies that are no longer happening. The second state is its opposite, numbness, fog, a flat distance from your own life, as if you are watching it through glass. Kolk identified this as the nervous system's other survival strategy. When activation becomes unbearable, the system shuts down. You stop feeling. You stop being there. You call it being tired. It isn't tired, it's protection. Both states have the same cost. You cannot inhabit your body. And a life that is not lived in the body is not, in any meaningful sense, lived. The third gate is the one that confuses you the most. The present, contaminated by the past. Your nervous system does not file memories neatly by date. It stores patterns, a certain tone of voice, a certain expression, a certain power dynamic, a certain smell. And when any of those patterns appears in the present, the system reacts to the original event as if it were happening now. Fully. Completely. Your heart rate, your breath, your muscles, your perception of the person in front of you. All of it reorganizes around a threat that ended years ago. You think you are reacting to your partner. You are reacting to your father. You think you are angry at your boss. You are 12 again, in that kitchen. The present disappears, replaced by something older wearing its clothes. This is why you overreact to things that don't warrant it. Why small triggers produce enormous responses. why you've been told you're too sensitive, too intense, too much, and why the accusation never quite fit, even though something about it felt true. It wasn't you being too much. It was the past, arriving unannounced in a body that could not tell the difference. 3 gates, hypervigilance, a dysregulated body, a present leaking with the past. This is not character, this is architecture. And no amount of thinking will remodel a house you cannot feel yourself standing in. Which is where we turn next. To the body you've been living above, not inside, for most of your adult life. Here is something you have never quite admitted to yourself. You do not live in your body. You live slightly above it, in your head, in your thoughts, in the running commentary. Your body is something you drag around, something that shows up at appointments, something that occasionally hurts, occasionally demands, occasionally betrays you. It is not home. It has not been home for a long time. Van der Kolk noticed this in patient after patient. People who could describe their lives in detail but went blank when he asked a simpler question. What do you feel right now, in your chest, in your stomach, in your hands? They didn't know. Not because they were stupid, because they had learned, early, that the body was not a safe place to be. If you grew up in a home where danger came through the body, a raised hand, a shove, a touch that shouldn't have happened, a stomach twisted by the sound of a key in the door, your nervous system made a decision you were not consulted on. It left. It moved upstairs, into the head, where it was quieter. It learned to narrate the body from a distance rather than inhabit it. This is dissociation, not the dramatic kind, the ordinary kind. The kind that most people who survived something difficult are still living inside of right now, as they watch this. It is how you can be exhausted and not know it until you collapse. How you can be starving and not notice until noon. How you can be furious and only realize it 3 hours later, when the person is gone. How you can be in love with someone and somehow never quite feel it landing. The signal leaves the body and never quite reaches you. There is a thin, permanent static between you and your own life. And here is the part that cuts. Van der Kolk's research showed that this is the exact mechanism that makes joy impossible. Because joy is not a thought. Pleasure is not a concept. Presence is not an idea you agree with. They are somatic events. They happen in the body, in the warmth of a muscle unclenching, in the depth of a breath you didn't have to think about, in the quiet register of a moment landing fully. If you are not inside your body, those events still occur, but they do not reach you. You watch them happen to someone who looks like you. This is why the good life you built doesn't feel like anything. It isn't because it isn't good. It's because you are not home to receive it. The way back is not through thinking. You cannot reason your way into your own skin. Van der Kolk spent years testing what actually works. And what works is always somatic. Breath that slows on purpose. Movement that has rhythm. Yoga, which he studied clinically and which reduced trauma symptoms in ways talk therapy alone could not. Attention to physical sensation without judgment. Where is their tension? What temperature? What texture? Not as a technique, as a practice of return. The body is not the enemy. It never was. The body is the room you fled, and the room is still there, waiting for you to come back. And coming back is not a single moment. It is not a breakthrough. It is a repeated, small, sometimes boring practice of showing up inside yourself and staying there a little longer each time, which requires something most people with trauma histories have never been taught to locate: a specific zone, a space between the storm and the shutdown, the place where living actually happens. That is what we turn to next. If what you're hearing resonates with you, you'll find real value in my ebooks. Beyond the Shadow breaks down Jung's core ideas, while Dialogues with the Unconscious gives you a 30-day path to apply them in your life. Both are linked in the pinned comment. There is a zone inside you that you have almost never visited. Van der Kolk calls it the window of tolerance. It is the range where your nervous system is activated enough to feel alive, but not so activated that it tips into panic. Engaged, but not overwhelmed. Awake, but not armored. It is where presence actually happens, where you can feel something without drowning in it, where you can connect with another person without performing or disappearing. It is the physiological home of a lived life, and you have been living outside of it, almost entirely, for years. If you survived something, your window is narrow. The space between too much and too little collapsed early, and you learned to move between the two extremes without ever really stopping in the middle. You know the extremes well. The extremes are familiar. On one end, there is hyperarousal, the racing heart, the spiral of thought, the irritability that arrives out of nowhere and takes over the room, the anxiety that wakes you up at 4 in the morning with a checklist of things you cannot do anything about. This is not a personality. This is a nervous system firing above its window, in a zone it was trained to consider normal. On the other end, there is hypoarousal, the flatness, the fog, the Sunday afternoons that disappear without you, the strange distance from your own feelings, the not quite caring about things you know you should care about. This is not laziness or depression in the simple sense. This is a nervous system firing below its window, shut down because staying activated was costing too much. Most of your life has happened in those two zones, either keyed up or checked out, sometimes swinging between them in a single afternoon. What you have almost never experienced is the middle, simply being here, not braced, not numb, just present, in a body, in a moment, with enough activation to feel and enough regulation to stay. Van der Kolk's work showed that recovery is not the elimination of difficult feelings. It is the expansion of this window, a slow, deliberate widening of the range in which you can tolerate being alive without leaving your own body. And the practices that widen it are unglamorous. They do not look like breakthroughs, slow, diaphragmatic breathing, because the long exhale signals safety to the vagus nerve in a way no thought can. Rhythmic movement, walking, swimming, dancing, because rhythm itself regulates a dysregulated system. Gradual, deliberate exposure to situations that activate you slightly, staying present through the activation and noticing that nothing catastrophic happens. That last one is the one most people skip, because it is boring, because it feels like it shouldn't work, because the ego wants something dramatic, a revelation, a collapse, a cathartic moment that changes everything. The nervous system does not work that way. The nervous system learns the way a child learns to swim, through repeated, survivable exposure to the thing it has been afraid of. Each time you stay in mild activation without fleeing into panic or shutting down into numbness, your window widens by a millimeter. It does not feel like anything. You will not notice it happening. You will notice, months later, that something that used to wreck you no longer does. This is the quiet, unromantic truth of healing a nervous system. There is no moment where it happens. There is only the accumulation. And that accumulation, it turns out, cannot happen alone. Because the nervous system is not a closed system. It was built to be regulated by other nervous systems. And that is the part of this story that almost nobody tells you. You have been trying to fix this by yourself. That is probably the most important sentence in this video. Read it again. You have been treating your recovery as a private project, something to be figured out alone, in your own head, with your own willpower, through your own insight. And it has not worked. And you have assumed that means you are not trying hard enough. It isn't that. It's that you were never supposed to do this alone. The nervous system was never designed to regulate itself in isolation. Van der Kolk's research, alongside decades of work in developmental psychology and neuroscience, revealed something that rearranges how you should think about your own healing. The human nervous system is, from birth, a social organ. It learns to regulate by borrowing regulation from another nervous system that is already regulated. An infant does not calm itself. It calms because it is held by a calm adult, whose breathing, heart rate, and presence physically transmit safety through proximity. This is called co-regulation. And it is not something you grow out of. It is something adults need too, every day, whether they know it or not. If you grew up in an environment where the adults around you were themselves dysregulated, anxious, angry, absent, frightening, inconsistent, you did not receive the co-regulation your system was expecting. So you learned to self-regulate prematurely, badly, with whatever tools a child could invent: vigilance, performance, dissociation, control. You became independent because you had to, and you have been paying for that independence ever since. This is why thinking your way out has failed. Thinking is solitary. The part of you that is still stuck is not a part that can be reached alone. It is a part that was wounded in relationship and can only be healed in relationship. Specifically, in proximity to a nervous system that is calm, consistent, and present enough to lend you its regulation until yours remembers how. Van der Kolk found that the single strongest predictor of recovery from trauma was not a technique. It was whether the person had, somewhere in their life, a safe relationship, a therapist, a partner, a friend, a group, someone whose presence physically slowed them down, not intellectually, physically. You feel it in the shoulders, in the breath, in the way your body quiets when they walk into the room. If you do not have that, you do not have a character problem. You have a missing ingredient. And here is the harder truth underneath this. You have probably been avoiding exactly this kind of person. Because calm presence, to a nervous system trained on chaos, does not feel like safety. It feels like boredom. It feels like something is missing. It feels like you cannot trust it. You have chased, instead, the nervous systems that matched your own, the intense ones, the unpredictable ones, the ones who made your body feel familiar, which you mistook for alive. Familiar is not alive. Familiar is just the shape of the old emergency, wearing a new face. The work, then, is this. Slowly, deliberately, you begin to orient toward people whose presence regulates you. You notice, physically, who calms you and who activates you. And you stop rationalizing away that information. You accumulate, one interaction at a time, experiences of being with someone safe and not having anything bad happen. Small, repeated, unremarkable. Your nervous system is watching. It is learning, in the only language it speaks, that there is another way to be. This is how the rewiring happens. Not alone, never alone. And once you see that, once you understand that survival was solitary and living cannot be, the final piece comes into view, the one that is simpler than everything else and harder than all of it combined. Here is what you have not let yourself feel. You are extraordinary. What you did to survive required a level of adaptation most people will never have to develop. You read rooms children should not have to read. You anticipated moods, managed adults, organized a self around the unpredictable shape of other people's pain. You built a nervous system capable of operating through conditions that would have broken a less resourceful child. You should be dead, or worse, and you are here. Survival was your mastery. And nobody ever named it that, because survival does not come with applause. But the thing you mastered is not the thing you need now. And this is the cruelest turn of the whole story. The very skills that kept you alive are now the architecture of your unlived life. The vigilance that saved you is the reason you cannot rest. The dissociation that protected you is the reason you cannot feel. The independence that carried you is the reason you cannot be held. To live now, you have to become unskilled at the thing you are most skilled at. You have to teach a nervous system that was forged in war that the war is over. And you have to do it knowing the nervous system will not believe you for a long time. This is the hardest truth van der Kolk's work points to, and it is the one nobody says out loud. Healing is a humiliation. It is the humiliation of going back to the beginning of something you have been doing your whole life and doing it badly, on purpose, slowly, with a shaking hand. It is learning to breathe when you already know how to breathe. Learning to feel your feet when you have walked for 40 years. Learning to let someone be kind to you and not flinch. Learning to receive pleasure and not brace for the bill. You will feel stupid. That is the fee. You will feel exposed, small, amateurish at the exact task every other adult seems to have mastered without effort. That feeling is not a sign you are failing. It is the sign you have arrived at the actual work. And the actual work is this. You stop trying to think your way home. You begin, instead, to return to the body. One breath, one meal eaten slowly, one walk noticed, one moment of pleasure not interrupted. You stop rewarding your own vigilance. You start practicing, deliberately, the unbearable vulnerability of being unguarded in a safe room. You let someone's calm touch your system. You do not run when it feels strange. You accumulate. That is the whole method. You accumulate small, survivable experiences of a life that is not an emergency, and you let your nervous system, very slowly, revise its picture of what is normal. This is not fast. It is not cinematic. There will be no scene where everything lifts. There will be, one morning, months from now, a moment where you realize you were just there, in your life, in your body, in a room, and nothing was bracing. And it will pass before you can hold on to it. And then, it will come again. That is what living looks like, for someone who mastered surviving. It is quieter than you expected. It asks less of your intensity and more of your willingness to be small and new. So here is the question I want you to sit with. Not answer, sit with. What would it cost you to stop being impressive at surviving? What would you have to grieve? What part of your identity would have to die for a slower, softer, more ordinary self to finally have a chance? If something in you went still when you read that, something new, let that something lead. If this reached you, leave a comment with what it named in you. That honesty is part of the work. And before you close this, understand something. You did not come here by accident. Something in you has been trying for a long time to find the language for what you have been carrying. You found part of it today. There is more waiting in the next video. And the process that started in you while watching this is not finished. It does not finish in one sitting. It finishes in the accumulation. So stay close. The body that kept the score is finally being taught a different song, and you have already begun learning it.